He had a tradition. He would send his victims something before killing them. A calling card. The Mexican passion flower.
Now, episode 6 didn't just pick up from where they left off in episode 5. It tightened the screws around every major player in a different way. Claudia's death has everybody pointing fingers at the cartel. The walls are really closing in on Stacey Marks. AUSA Seng also seems to have figured out that she's compromised. Vic Flynn seems to have had enough of being everybody's bitch. He's pushing to regain power and control. Jenard and Diamond continue to strengthen their bond after they made a move with the Chinese to source fentanyl. Miguel Garcia is hanging off that cliff by a thread, and the fact that Tommy was the one who gave him a lifeline probably ends up with him being kicked out of CBI. So episode 6 will definitely contribute towards a huge turning point. Crack seems to be appearing, alliances seems to be shifting, some relationships seem to be at breaking point, while other relationships seem to have taken a turn. As always, we're going to be running through all the key clues, conversations, topics, and Easter eggs going back to Power, so stick with this video right through to the very end, as we run through all things Power Book 4 Force, Season 3, Episode 6. Now, towards the end of episode 5, we said goodbye to Claudia Flynn. There was also another bloodbath involving CBI and the Yardies. Both were left by Tommy and the CBI as statements, and also made to look like kills from the cartel. So this episode kicks off with Stacey Marks looking at the statement left by Tommy towards the end of episode 5. He left Claudia Flynn's body chained up, and next to her he left a rat. In then comes AUSA Seng, who tells Stacey they're screwed. The case against the cartel is pretty much dead in the water, because Claudia was the one who was supposed to testify against the Marquez cartel. Although that's exactly what he wanted anyway. Without Claudia Flynn, they have no case against Roberto Ortega. So Stacey Marks found herself under big pressure in episode 6, and she knew it. She knew she screwed up. We then saw a meeting with the task force where we were introduced to a new face. Hardwick is gone for a few weeks due to a family emergency, so in comes Trina Delgado, which I'm not sure if there's a deeper reasoning behind the switch. We know law enforcement can always be one way they can cross over the world of Power, but this is a completely brand new face. I guess for now we can park it and see whether we do come back to it in any of the last 4 episodes. It may just be a case of scheduling and not being able to shoot the final 4 episodes for Hardwick. But from now on, because of the twist involving AUSA Seng back in episode 3, I've always just kind of got my guard up. Now with AUSA Seng, he did mention that Claudia's testimony was the only thing that was stopping the judge from dismissing the entire case. Unless they were able to pull a rabbit out the hat, Ortega was going to walk. Now Delgado proposed that they bring in Egan, and so did AUSA Seng, but we know Stacey Marks is now in Tommy's back pocket from episode 5, and that's something she can't afford to do, which Seng did push back on, although just as this was turning a little feisty, this meeting was then interrupted by Donna Jackson. Donna was fuming with Stacey Marks because she now has a dead CI. It's bad for optics, it gives their opposition ammo to use for their campaign, and frankly, it just looks like Stacey Marks is failing to deliver on her promises. She made some big promises to cut the city's crime rate back in episode 5 in her speech, but what about the case that she had pretty much nailed at the beginning of season 3? Merkovich died in episode 1, Claudia is now dead, and Roberto Ortega is about to walk. She needs convictions and she needs them quick. Otherwise she could definitely say goodbye to the mayor's office, which is something we spoke about earlier in the week. We spoke about how Tommy actually needs Stacey Marks to get a few small wins, because if she doesn't then become the mayor of Chicago, and then that may become a problem for Tommy. But more on that a bit later on. Now, in episode 5, when the CBI took out the Yardies, Diamond said to make it look like it was a cartel hit, and that's exactly what Bobby DeFranco thought. They had the body strung up, they also left them in the Insane Prince's territory in Little Village, so if anything, law enforcement would probably go and question the Insane Princes. They also linked it back to Roberto Ortega's uncle being thrown off a balcony, so maybe it was retaliation. Now with Vic, just to rewind it back for a second for those who may have forgotten, back in episode 2, Tommy and Diamond did make a deal with Peter, the leader of the Albanians. A part of the deal was to give them the Irish bars up north, which did actually belong to Vic. At the time, Vic wasn't happy about it, but it was a great business move by Tommy, and frankly, Vic wasn't exactly in a position to negotiate or stop Tommy either. But we all know he's had enough. He wants his freedom back, and he wants the Flynn legacy back. So we saw him walk into the bar, he mentioned that this was Flynn's territory, but you got the sense that multiple times during this episode, nobody seems to respect Vic like they did with Walter Flynn. Both Peter and Tommy did stick it to him in episode 6. He doesn't have the same reputation, respect, he's not a gangster like his father once was, and he was basically laughed at by Peter and the Albanians. Now, Bolo proposed to torch the bar down, but that doesn't solve their problem. They needed to take it back, and they had to take it back with force. However, this is where he learned about Claudia's death. We all know they didn't have much of a relationship after what happened in 205, but no doubt, this definitely still would have hurt. Now, with Tommy and Diamond, we pick up with them at the barbershop basement. We had Diamond telling Tommy that he should have called him about the Claudia dump. And honestly, the nerve from Diamond. This is someone who called a hit on D-Mac back in episode 1. This is someone who's letting his brother twist his mind, and someone who's also been making moves behind Tommy's back. He did it with Zamos and the Yardies in episode 5, and he did it with Madame Wu later on in episode 6 as well. He also met with Che in episode 5 where he took Jenard. So it really is crazy talk from Diamond. I'm not saying Tommy is innocent, he's definitely made a lot of calls and moves behind Diamond's back as well. We've spoken about how Tommy is behaving Ghost-esque a lot more since season 2, but Tommy rightfully called him out and said he was way too busy making moves with his brother, which definitely is a big problem for Tommy. Jenard and Diamond are getting stronger and stronger as each episode passes by, and you do get the feeling that next episode may potentially be the breaking point, especially when and if Diamond finds out Tommy helped Miguel. Again, we're going to come back around to that a bit later on. While these guns were here, Tommy mentioned that he used to have one of these back in the day, and it actually reminded me of Diego Jimenez's gun that we saw back in Power. It doesn't mean that it's the same gun, not everything has to be connected to that extent in the world of Power, but in Tommy's words, definitely El Chapo shit right here.
This some real El Chapo looking shit right here.
Now, Diamond's idea was to keep the guns, spread them around the coalition, but Tommy had a better idea. He thought, why not use the guns and lure in one of Miguel Garcia's customers, the Assyrians. He later met with Asher. He mentioned that under the CBI, they don't just have bags full of product, they can also offer him these guns, product at the same price, and no droughts. Consistent business. And just like that, they shook hands on a deal. And this is what I mean over the past few weeks. Tommy may be behaving like Ghost, he may be keeping things from Diamond, just like we saw after their meeting with Che in episode 6, but the CBI wouldn't be in the position they're in without Tommy making these strategic moves. He thought, use these guns as an incentive, bring in another crew on board, which not only makes the CBI and the coalition stronger, but it also makes your opposition weaker. And in the long run, you're going to get paid way more than these guns are worth anyway. Tommy's vision and quick execution is no doubt the reason why CBI are on top. Now, with business, we had CBI and the Insane Princes meeting with Che to re-up, just like they did back in episode 4. And just like in episode 4, we had Tommy and Diamond drop 2 big bags of cash, asking for double the product, which Miguel and the Insane Princes couldn't match. They lost yet another crew to the CBI thanks to Tommy, and Miguel didn't look happy at all. He's no doubt on the brink, he's under big pressure, and Che even did warn, if you can't move the product, it does look like CBI can pick up his slack. Miguel Garcia really was teetering on the edge of that cliff this episode, and all Tommy and Diamond had to do was kind of just give him that helping hand and push him off. An opportunity that did actually present itself in episode 6. Tommy really did have the perfect opportunity to hammer the final nail into Miguel Garcia's coffin as a Connect in Chicago. Crews were stopped later on by Bobby DeFranco and his partner. With Bobby DeFranco, he is someone who you can tell is quite reasonable. Back in season 2 at the beginning, he even mentioned that these guys in the streets do have a code. You don't have to like it, but you do have to respect it. On the flip side, you then have cops like this who love taking advantage of their badge and uniform. You do also have to kind of question Cruz and the Insane Princes with the way they were moving their product. If you're constantly transporting product, surely you have to have hidden compartments to hide the drugs, just like Manny. We saw this back in season 2, and we did see it again in episode 6. It was a big mistake and a big setback for Miguel. He received a call and the bail amount was 10% of 5 million. 1 million per brick. And on top of that, he still owed Che. Miguel Garcia was under big pressure and it did look like there was no way out. He was hanging off that cliff by a thread in this episode. All Tommy had to do was just give him that helping nudge by actually not doing anything. But first up, he came to see Shanti. He mentioned that they should be in the all clear with Claudia. The rat made it look like it was a cartel hit. They also spoke about keeping the Viagra triangles on lock without Claudia and Elise, which is when Jenard walked in. Tommy was here sharing a spliff with Jenard's girl, and then he blew the smoke right into Jenard's face as he walked out of the room. You honestly gotta love the way Tommy just doesn't give a flying fuck. Now, Shanti told Jenard to relax because the more she can get in with Tommy, the closer they can get to Che, which is something I've always advised caution on when it comes to Shanti. Gary Leonard did tease prior to season 3 that she's just there to service herself, but I do actually wonder where her loyalties will lie after episode 6. Jenard told Shanti that he already got the meet with Che in episode 5, which didn't go down well with Shanti at all. She's been wanting to meet with Che ever since season 2, and the fact that Jenard didn't tell Shanti, which was on purpose by the way, we all saw him delete that text, that didn't sit well with her, and that's when she turned cold. This relationship no doubt is about to take a huge turn. But to get back into Shanti's good books, he went to deal with Manny, where he noticed the brick of fentanyl that's been dropping people in the streets. Manny then mentioned that this brick will make him 10 times more, and she's getting it from the Chinese who they introduced to us back in episode 2. Now, he ran this by Diamond, who mentioned that Tommy wouldn't be down with that, and all they needed to worry about was getting rid of Miguel Garcia. Jenard also asked about the guns, and when Diamond told him that Tommy used it to get a deal with the Assyrians, Jenard went straight in for Tommy, which in my opinion wasn't a bad play at all by Tommy. If Jenard had a problem with Tommy helping Miguel, then that's definitely fair enough. But Tommy managed to lock in another crew for the coalition while making his opposition weaker. Definitely was a great move by Tommy in my opinion. The problem is, Jenard is Diamond's blood, and over the course of this season, the constant whispering in Diamond's ear and talking about Tommy making moves behind his back, which started all the way back in episode 1, Tommy treating Diamond more like a number 2, making moves that Diamond doesn't agree with Jenard pushing Diamond to stop letting an outsider in New York call the shots, telling him the old Diamond would never let this happen. Diamond was eventually going to snap, and I do think we are getting back to the shades of the old Diamond. I mentioned this last week in my episode 5 breakdown when he made the move against the Yardies. This definitely looked like shades of the old Diamond, and I do think we saw it again with Big Smurf. It took a while for Jenard to get through to his brother, but Diamond was finally on board. Now, the way they were going to get this past Tommy was by putting it to a vote with the coalition, and I do think we all know what that vote will be. If you're given an opportunity to 9 or 10 times your profit from this fentanyl, of course the coalition are going to say yeah. Although having said that, some may actually decide to side with Tommy, for example Big Smurf, because we do know we are in for a bit of a tear down the middle when it comes to CBI, and we're going to come to that in just a moment. First up, we had Jenard and Diamond coming to see Madame Wu, and she definitely is someone who does command respect. You saw the way Manny spoke and addressed her the moment Madame Wu kind of just looked at her. Madame Wu and the Chinese definitely command respect, and they definitely aren't here to play games. She also mentioned a few weeks ago someone robbed them from one of their dice games, which, let's remember, was DMAC. Not sure if there will be consequences to that particular hit, but definitely something to keep in mind. The body parts also belong to the security guard of that dice game, and Jenard really did kind of look shook. For someone who's always talking about getting a meet with a Connect, stepping up, he also looked quite shook when he met Che in episode 5 as well. But Madame Wu and the Chinese are now in the frame, and they definitely look like the real deal. Now, after they made the deal with Madame Wu, Big Smurf did mention it did kind of feel strange to keep Tommy out the loop, which is when we saw the old Diamond return again. You saw Jenard's face just kind of drop when Diamond went for Big Smurf, because I think Diamond's probably had enough of everybody saying Tommy this, Tommy that, would Tommy approve? We actually spoke about something very similar earlier on this season, back in Power when Tommy had a conversation with Ruiz, the head of the Soldado Nation. He said something very similar to Tommy back in season 1.
From now on, you import guns for the entire organization.
Sounds good. But Ghost will never agree to that.
My word's not good enough.
Why wasn't Tommy's word enough? Why did they have to hear it from Ghost? They were partners, so why wasn't Tommy's word enough? And I do think that's how Diamond now feels. He's the head of CBI, so his word was enough, and he's now making it known. However, we did speak about it earlier this week about a potential split within the coalition, and this attack on Big Smurf, this move with Madame Wu and the Chinese, this vote that they're about to have with the coalition, no doubt this will tear the CBI straight down the middle. It's a big problem for Jenard and Diamond, but may kind of just give Tommy something to work with when he is eventually kicked out. The same with Shanti. We know she doesn't want to be showered with gifts and cash by her boyfriend. What she wants is power. What she wants is control and a direct link to a Connect, so she can then start making moves of her own, which no doubt she definitely will make, but you can tell that her and Jenard's relationship is a ticking time bomb. We're still yet to see the moment where Shanti takes the baseball bat to Jenard's car, so things are definitely going to go from bad to worse with this relationship, and then it's all about what plan does she put into place, because a character like Shanti, we do have to remember, is very strategic. We have to remember that she's a boxer, she can definitely take punches, it's just about whether she can land a few herself in the closing rounds, which I personally think she can. Now with Vic, he doesn't want Ray to get involved in what he's in. He did mention that she may want to get out of town for a couple of days, and this is exactly the reason why. Ray could end up being used as a weakness to control Vic, which is why he made it look like she was an escort. Definitely quick thinking on Vic's part, but Tommy was here to send Vic another stern warning. He was still running shit and to set the meet with Stacey Marks. Now, on Stacey Marks and Vic Flynn, I kind of disagree that Vic kind of still works for her. I thought now that they flipped Alicia, who was the eyewitness to Vic killing Colin back in season 1, meant that Stacey Marks lost her leverage over Vic. So I'm personally not sure how and why Stacey Marks still has some level of control over Vic. In my eyes, she shouldn't. But in came Tommy, who said that he can definitely help Stacey Marks find Claudia's killer. Stacey Marks needs convictions. And again, this is another topic we spoke about earlier in the week. For Tommy to remain 3 moves ahead and keep Stacey Marks in his back pocket, for him to have the keys to the city means that Stacey Marks needs to get into the mayor's office. But for that to happen, She still needs convictions. She has to get a couple of wins, which Tommy did say he could help with by arresting a member of the Marquez cartel for Claudia's hit. But as expected, she pushed back just like she did in episode 5, and then she went for Vic, which is when he exploded. All Stacey Marks has ever done for the past season is constantly move the goalposts. She's been using him for her own selfish gain and definitely not helping Vic, which is when Vic flipped a switch. He said he killed his father, he killed Vargas back in season 2, who was on her team, and she wasn't going to do anything about it because she was as compromised as they were. In that moment, Vic gave her no choice but to run with Tommy's plan. Now, Vic wasn't done here. I do think the same as Diamond, Vic was fed up of people telling him that he isn't shit, he's not a gangster, he'll forever be in the shadow of Walter Flynn. Tommy even taunted him earlier on in the episode about sleeping with Gloria and also snapping Simon's arm the minute he got to Chicago. You add Claudia's death. I do think Vic has had enough of being pushed around and being made a bitch by Tommy and Stacey Marks. The same goes for the Albanians, who basically laughed at him at the beginning of episode 6, which is why he made the move he made. He wants to put the Flynn name back on the map. He wants to become king of the North, and he also wants to stop people making him out to be, frankly, a bit of a joke. Because that's what people think he is at this moment in time. He's a joke. So we saw him at the Albanians, but he did let Peter walk out of that bar, which I don't think was such a great idea. Tommy will definitely lose his shit when he finds out in episode 7. But again, what will Tommy do if he's kicked out the coalition himself? Which is why I've remained consistent and why I've maintained throughout the season, it may just be time for the balance of power to shift in Vic's direction, at least in the short term. Now, with DMAC, it was time to earn his stripes with CBI. It wasn't the mentoring and guiding that I was expecting, but we know DMAC can handle himself in the streets. Tommy asked him to plant the gun in Gabriel Ortega's house, so they could pin him with Claudia's death. And DMAC got the job done, no questions asked. There was a small scare, but it was no problem for DMAC. Now, just sticking with DMAC for a second, we did see him and Genesis start to become closer. She asked him to reconsider giving Education another shot. He said he will think about it, which I highly doubt. I still think Genesis may be one to watch who may be getting caught in a crossfire, but who knows whether DMAC would ever consider going to school again. We've seen Tommy drop that 500k for Maria's brother because of love. Just how much does DMAC want to make it work with Genesis? Again, very similar to Tommy, very similar to Kanan. I do think DMAC is street through and through. Now, with Claudia's murder, Stacey Marks did receive a anonymous tip, which was of course from Pageant Inc., aka Tommy Egan. They raided Gabriel Ortega's house and found the gun in the fridge. But that look from Stacey Marks and Seng, I think Seng knows that she's compromised. And I think Stacey Marks knows that Seng is onto her as well. Both have been questioning each other a lot lately, and it definitely is about to get really interesting within law enforcement. It looks like Seng knows that she's compromised, but she doesn't know that Seng is working for the Marquez cartel, and probably knows that this is a setup. So I do think Seng probably does put 2 and 2 together that Stacey Marks is in Tommy's back pocket. It definitely is going to get interesting when it comes to AUSA Seng and Stacey Marks. But let's get to the hot topic of episode 6, the triangle involving Tommy, Maria, and Miguel Garcia. Now, earlier in the episode, in a rush, Maria did leave her phone on the couch. And while Tommy was cleaning his gun, her phone rang, and that was the moment he found out Maria was pregnant. But was it too late? In that moment, we had Maria already in the room, ready to go through with her abortion. But I think we all knew she'd change her mind anyway. We'd already seen the clues prior to season 3 and a lot of teasers and trailers, especially this scene from the episode 6 trailer. What Tommy couldn't understand was, why didn't she just speak to him about it? The problem was she was excited, she did text him straight away, she even bought a little baby grow, but the doubt started to then creep in when she saw all those bullet holes and blood at the end of episode 5. In that moment, we then saw Tommy put his hand to Maria's throat, which was another great callback to the moment when he strangled Holly back in Power when she was pregnant. That was an Easter egg back to this particular moment if anybody missed it. But she told him that she didn't actually go through with the abortion. And just have a look at how happy Tommy was. Christmas isn't cancelled. Christmas really did come early for Tommy. He's finally got another chance to do this right with Maria, and she is right when she said she knows nobody will protect them like Tommy will. The problem at this moment in time was Miguel. He was still making moves with Roberto Ortega to wipe Tommy off the map, which is where Roberto Ortega actually gave Miguel a stern warning as well. He told him about the story about their grandfather, how he was loved, respected, and a man you never wanted to cross. But if you did, he'd send his victims a calling card before he killed them, which was the Mexican passion flower. The purple leaves help you sleep, and it was his way of telling his victims that they'd be put to sleep forever. So if Tommy wasn't taken off the chessboard, Miguel would be the one who'd be receiving the flower in his place. Again, it did remind me of the calling card from the Jimenez cartel, the spider. We all saw that back in Power, where they'd leave this calling card as a warning, you're next, or where they would claim that this was a hit from the Jimenez cartel. With the Marquez cartel, it was the Mexican passion flower. Now, on one side, we had Miguel plotting to kill Tommy, and on the other, we had Tommy agreeing to help Miguel. Honestly, it really was a crazy situation. Maria told him about how Cruz got arrested and how Miguel needed help. Family was important to Maria, and she asked Tommy if he could help Miguel, which he did reluctantly agree to do. Crazy, I know, but that's how much he loves Maria. He dropped off 500k to Miguel just to help him scrape by, and if and when Diamond and the Coalition find out that Tommy did this, big problems ahead for Tommy, no doubt. Diamond even mentioned earlier on one of their main focuses was to get rid of Miguel Garcia. Well, they had the perfect opportunity to do so in episode 6, and they didn't even have to lift a finger. They weren't even the ones behind law enforcement grabbing Cruz, that was all on the Insane Princes. But the moment Diamond finds out Tommy threw Miguel a bone and kept him afloat, I do think we all know what happens next. Tommy's going to be kicked out of the CBI, because it will look like he's conspiring with an enemy behind CBI's back, which Diamond did actually question back in episode 1. He questioned whether his relationship with Maria was affecting his judgment when he was making moves against Miguel Garcia's operation. So definitely big problems ahead for Tommy and Diamond, that's for sure. Now, I personally wouldn't have done what Tommy did, because you still have Miguel Garcia plotting to get rid of Tommy in the background, even after he helped him. But it is easy for us as the audience to say that, because we have a clearer picture of most of the chessboard. In Tommy's position, I do think it's still crazy that he did help Miguel, but you can kind of understand why. He wasn't doing it for Miguel, he was doing it for Maria. Still didn't change the fact that in a few hours, the hit on Tommy Egan was still on. Now, with the dinner scene, which is definitely his first of its kind for Power Book 4 Force, it felt and looked hella awkward at the time, which was followed up by Maria dropping the news that she was pregnant, and that changed everything going forward. Just like he did when Monet dropped the bombshell that Diana was pregnant back in Book 2 Ghost, which stopped Tariq from killing Diana, the same thing happened here. He kept looking at the time because he knew Tommy had to bounce by 9:45, and you could tell that he'd changed his mind about getting rid of Tommy. Family means a lot to Maria and Miguel, and he didn't want to take that away from Maria. So he told him to stay for dessert. The entire mood completely shifted at the dinner. They were talking about the past, laughing and joking. But when Bones showed up to the meet with the RDs, Titus made the call to Ortega, and we all what he said earlier. The Mexican passion flower was now sent to Miguel Garcia. It really is a big moment because everything that we saw play out in episode 6 with shift alliances, shift coalitions, tear relationships, build new ones, everything is about to change going forward. And at the heart of it will no doubt be Tommy and Miguel Garcia putting aside their differences and most likely teaming up. The news of the baby definitely has changed everything, but is time now also ticking for Miguel Garcia? I can actually also see a scenario playing out where Miguel Garcia actually sacrifices himself to even save Tommy and Maria. It would be quite the turn, considering he's been trying to kill him for the entire season, but I can definitely see it. With that being said, there'll definitely be plenty of time to dig into this topic in the week, along with everything else. Again, it was another great episode. Gary Lennon really is doing his thing, although I'm not 100% sure where that OG Power character is that he mentioned would return for episode 6. That was a little strange. He may have potentially got the episode mixed up with another, but we'll definitely get into that in the upcoming week as well. Drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section on all things episode 6, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.